G'day, and welcome to The Long Way Forward, episode 9. This episode is called Reflection and Self-Improvement, Turning Experience into Progress. If you've been following along from the early episodes, you'll probably notice that this journey we're on is not about quick fixes. You don't need fixing. We've talked about what you stand for. We've talked about aligning that. We've talked about perseverance, knowing your numbers, celebrating success. And today we arrive at something, a concept that quietly brings all of those together. Reflection. And if these conversations are helping you think differently about progress, I'd love it if you'd subscribe. You'll get heaps more from what we're going to talk about moving forward, because moving forward, we're going to start applying these ideas to leadership, decision-making, life, and long-term performance, where real change, life satisfaction, and dare I say it, happiness begins to show up. Here's an opening thought for you. Ponder this. Experience alone doesn't make you better. Reflection does. Here's why. Two people can go through the same challenge. One repeats the same patterns for years. The other one reflects, learns, adjusts, and grows. They're both putting in the hard yards, they're both putting in the effort, but that's not the difference. The difference is reflection. And this is why reflection matters. Most people live reactively. Something happens, they deal with it, they move on. Next challenge, they deal with it. Next task, they do it. Next goal. But when you never pause to look back and reflect, you repeat mistakes without realizing it. You stay busy, but growth stays slow. Now let's be clear, reflection is not overthinking. Reflection isn't sitting around analysing every detail. It's not self-criticism. It's not beating you up. Don't criticise yourself unnecessarily. Plenty of people will do that for you for free. It's not replaying failures endlessly. Reflection is simple. What happened? What worked? What didn't work so well? What will I do differently next time? And that's it. Clear, practical, forward-focused. What happened? What worked? And what would I do differently next time? Looking forward, forward-focused, improvement. Now, early in my career, especially in sales, I learned something quickly. If I just kept working harder without thinking about the day, sure, I got a result, but I didn't actually improve. My win rates did not improve. I still got some wins, working hard, but when I looked back at conversations and I asked, what worked? Where did I lose people? What did I say differently when I made a sale? How did I present? What was my body language? All of these things. That reflection over years turned experience into skill. Without it, I'd still just be working over and over again, making the same mistakes at the same level. Now remember, there's a real link here in knowing your numbers. We talked about knowing your numbers in the last episode, so if you haven't heard it, go back and have a listen. It's well worth your time. Knowing your numbers shows you what happened. Reflection helps you understand why it happened. And they both matter. If you don't do enough work, you won't have enough numbers to reflect on. But numbers without reflection just becomes data with no meaning. Reflection without numbers becomes guesswork. When we combine them together, they create improvement. I'm going to hark back to sales again and just tell you about what that might mean. I would door knock 10 doors using the same line over and over again. And as I walked away from those doors, I would rate myself on a little bit of paper, write it down, 1 to 10, on how I felt it went. Then I would try a different introduction line. Same process. Repeat that 10 times, and every time as I walk away, assess how it went. Over the course of a day, if I made 50 or 60 introductions, that's 50 or 60 introduction lines. And by the end of that day, I could hone it down to 1 or 2 that resonated better. Suddenly, I'd sharpened that tool in the toolkit, the introduction. Now, this is about self-awareness, this element. That's what I'm really talking about there, because that's where self-improvement really begins. When you reflect honestly, you start seeing patterns, as I've just outlined. Situations that drain your energy, decisions, presentations that lead to better outcomes, behaviours that help or hurt progress. And when you see patterns, you can change them. You've got to be looking for them though. Awareness always comes before improvement. Always. Here's a perspective from a mentor that I used to have these conversations with. They said, here's something experience teaches you over time. The people who grow the fastest aren't necessarily the hardest workers. They're the ones willing to look at themselves honestly, sometimes brutally honestly. No ego, no excuses, just what can I learn from this? If you can get to that mindset, it's rare and it's powerful. It sets people apart. Remember, what can I learn from this? Whatever goes wrong, what can I learn from this? I think Arnold Schwarzenegger had a line in one of his movies. He said, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. Same thing. What can I learn from this? Here's how it might play out in everyday life. And it's not always reserved for big moments. It could be simple. At the end of a day, as I always do, I reflect. I ask myself, what went well? Sometimes what didn't go well isn't obvious. So I ask myself, what felt difficult? What would I adjust tomorrow? And I implement that into my planning. It might be something as simple as greeting somebody because I didn't this morning. Small reflections create small improvements. Small improvements build on one another. They compound. Now remember, the role of self-improvement is not about becoming someone completely different. This is a continuing theme. It's not about making you someone else. It's refinement. Just sharpening who you already are, removing that friction, knowing what works, strengthening it, letting go of what doesn't. That process never really ends because we're all works in progress. Believe me, I know I am. Here's a practical thing I want you to try this week. At the end of each day, and I do this by the way, at the end of each day, spend 2 minutes reflecting. Just 2 minutes. Ask yourself, what did I do well today? Write it down if you like. What could I have handled better? Write it down. What will I adjust tomorrow? Write it down. And you'll be surprised if you do that every day and then look back at those notes, you'll be surprised how quickly patterns emerge that tell you things that you can apply. Now remember, when reflection becomes a habit, something subtle happens. Your progress speeds up. Not because you're working harder, but because you're not repeating the same mistakes. You know what they are, you know what went wrong, you don't do it again. It's like learning to walk. You adjust sooner, you recover faster, and you improve every day. Now that's the real long game. Now, if you think about the journey we've taken so far, you've clarified what you stand for. You've learned about alignment. You developed perseverance. You now probably have a good idea about what your numbers are, what your win rates are. You learned how to celebrate progress and reward yourself. And now you reflect. You refine. This is the foundation. This is how real growth starts. And believe me, this is how I live my life, where I try to, as best I can. Most days I get it right. Most days. In the next episode, we're going to step into a new stage of this journey: leadership. Not titles or authority, by the way, but the kind of leadership that starts with how you lead yourself. Because once you understand reflection and self-improvement, you're ready to influence more than just your own outcomes. Reflection turns experience into wisdom. Self-improvement turns intention into action. When you combine wisdom with action, progress becomes deliberate. Results become consistent. This is the long way forward. And I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. And if you have, don't forget to subscribe, and I hope to see you commenting on future episodes. Thank you for listening.